The Secret Files of the Church. In the sealed archives of the Archdiocese of Guadalajara, there exists a dossier that was never meant to see the light of day, a document of 847 pages describing the horrors committed by Father Miguel Santamaria between the years 1654 and 1661, inside the convent of Santa Esperanza. It was there that 23 people mysteriously vanished, and according to testimonies from that time, blood-chilling screams could be heard every Holy Friday before dawn. The church authorities hid these events for over 350 years, relocating entire families, burning parish records, and burying the truth beneath layers of silence and lies. But today, for the first time, we will reveal what truly happened in that cursed place, where faith turned into a nightmare. Yet before we uncover the horrors that took place, we must go back to the very beginning of this story. A warning to the brave. Before we dive into this tale that will freeze your blood, I need to ask you something. This channel isn't for everyone, only for the bravest souls, those who dare to uncover the truth hidden behind church walls. If you have the courage to learn about secrets buried for centuries, subscribe now and tell us from which country or city you're listening. Few channels dare to tell the stories we tell here. That's why we're building a brotherhood of mystery hunters, people unafraid to confront the darkness. Now, let me take you back to the days when faith and horror intertwined in unimaginable ways. The arrival of Father Miguel. It was 1652. The small village of San Isidro del Valle, located in the hills of Jalisco, was a peaceful community of barely 800 souls. Its people lived from cultivating corn and beans and raising small livestock. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, where doors remained open during the day, and where the ringing of the church bell marked the rhythm of everyday life. At the heart of the village stood the convent of Santa Esperanza, a majestic structure with thick volcanic stone walls and a bell tower visible from every corner of San Isidro. Built 50 years earlier by Franciscan friars, the convent was not only a religious center, it also served as a school, hospital, and refuge for travelers. Its corridors echoed with Gregorian chants at dawn, and its library held over 400 books, a true treasure for that era. The people of San Isidro del Valle took immense pride in their convent. The women wove altar cloths for the main chapel. The men offered their labor to keep the walls strong and clean. And together they contributed generous tithes that made the convent the spiritual heart of the region. It was in this atmosphere of quiet devotion that, in October of 1652, Father Miguel Santamaria arrived. Tall, sharp-featured, with pale green eyes that seemed to pierce straight through the soul, Father Miguel was only 31 years old, yet he had already served in 3 parishes across New Spain. He came highly recommended by the Bishop of Mexico as a man of extraordinary devotion and deep knowledge of the Holy Scriptures. The villagers welcomed him with joy. Their previous pastor, Fray Antonio, had died of fever after 15 years of service, and the community longed for a new spiritual guide. From his very first sermon, Father Miguel impressed everyone. He spoke with a passion that made the wooden beams of the ceiling tremble. He quoted passages of the Bible few priests dared to mention. And he had a way of looking at every parishioner as if he could see directly into their souls. "God has sent me to you for a reason," he said during his first Sunday Mass, his voice echoing through the nave. "There are secrets that must be revealed, sins that must be purified, and souls that need urgent salvation." Among those who remembered those words was Maria Esperanza Villanueva, a 34-year-old widow who directed the convent choir. Years later, she would recall that sermon with a shiver, for she would become one of the few survivors able to tell what truly happened, though few believed her for decades. The Sacred Circle. During the first months, Father Miguel seemed to be exactly what San Isidro del Valle had prayed for. He organized additional masses on Wednesdays, introduced night confessions on Fridays, and created something new, a special prayer group for those in need of extraordinary purification. This sacred circle, as he called it, was made up of young men and women between the ages of 16 and 25, those whom, according to Father Miguel, showed signs of divine grace. One of the first chosen was Catalina Herrera, the 19-year-old daughter of the village blacksmith. She was kind and devout, known for her soft singing voice in the choir and her dedication to caring for her sick mother. Her parents were honored when Father Miguel told them that Catalina had been chosen by the Lord for a sacred mission. "The Lord has shown me in dreams," Father Miguel explained with that intense gaze of his, "that some of his children need special preparation. Dark forces stalk those with pure hearts, and we must protect them with prayer and holy rituals." To question a man of the church was unthinkable back then. The people saw in Father Miguel not just a priest, but a messenger of God. Soon, more families received the same honor. Esteban Morales, 17, son of a prosperous merchant. Ana Lucia Bosques, 20, known for her beauty and delicate embroidery. And Tomás Guerrero, a 23-year-old widower who worked as a municipal scribe. In total, 14 young people became part of this secret inner circle, meeting every Friday after sunset inside a private room in the convent. The change. At first, everything seemed harmless. But soon, the townsfolk began to notice subtle changes in the chosen ones. They arrived late to work on Saturdays. They spoke less. Their eyes looked distant, as if trapped in thought, or in prayer that never ended. Some villagers even swore they had seen the youths walking through the streets at night, pale and silent, like sleepwalkers guided by an unseen force. "My Catalina isn't the same anymore," confessed Esperanza Herrera to her friend Dolores Bosques, the mother of Ana Lucia. "She used to sing while grinding corn. Now she spends hours in silence, staring toward the convent, as if hearing voices I cannot." The night of March 13, 1654. That night shattered San Isidro del Vail's peace forever. It was unusually cold for the season. A strange wind blew from the mountains, carrying a metallic smell that made the animals restless in their pens. The moon hid behind dark clouds, and the entire village sank into a deeper darkness than usual. Around 2 a.m., Maria Esperanza Villanueva, who lived behind the convent, awoke to a sound she could never describe, not entirely human, not entirely animal. Later, she would recall it as if the earth itself were weeping. She rose quietly, careful not to wake her 2 children, and moved to the window overlooking the convent's courtyard. What she saw that night would haunt her until her final breath. In the courtyard, illuminated by flickering torches, stood a circle of hooded figures. Their shadows stretched and twisted across the stone walls. At the center of the circle stood a large wooden table, one Maria had never seen before. Upon it lay something. But the weak light made it impossible to tell what. The figures swayed in rhythm, chanting slowly in Latin, though the words did not sound like any prayer Maria had ever heard in church. The voice leading the chant was unmistakable, Father Miguel's. But there was something different in it now, something that made the skin crawl and the heart pound wildly. Maria counted 14 figures in total, the same number of youths in the sacred circle. The smallest among them had Catalina's exact height. Suddenly, the chanting stopped. A silence fell so heavy that Maria could hear her own heartbeat echoing in her ears. Then, she heard Father Miguel's voice clearly pierce the night air. "The sacrifice must be complete. Only then can we achieve the final purification that God demands of us." What happened next, Maria could never fully tell. Her testimony always broke at that point. The few sentences she managed to say were so disturbing that the scribes of the time chose to omit them from the official church records. But one fact was recorded. At dawn on March 14, Catalina Herrera did not return home. Her parents rushed to the convent, desperate for answers. Father Miguel received them calmly, explaining that Catalina had received a special calling from the Lord and had left on a holy pilgrimage to a convent in Mexico City. "God has chosen her for a sacred life," he said serenely. "Rejoice, for your daughter has been called to serve him." The Herreras, confused, heartbroken, but faithful, believed him. After all, what parent wouldn't feel pride knowing their child had been chosen to serve God? But within 2 weeks, Ana Lucia Bosques also vanished. Then Tomás Guerrero, then Esteban Morales. One by one, all 14 members of Father Miguel's sacred circle disappeared. Every time, the priest gave the same explanation: they had been chosen by divine calling, sent to distant monasteries to help combat the forces of evil. Some families wrote letters to the addresses Father Miguel provided, but the replies never came. When they asked why, he told them the youths had taken vows of silence as part of their spiritual preparation. The whispers and the drawings. In the months that followed the disappearances, San Isidro del Valle began to change. The village that once rang with laughter and song sank into a thick fog of tension and whispers. The animals were the first to sense it. Dogs began howling for no reason, always between 2 and 3 in the morning, the same hour Maria Esperanza had once witnessed that unspeakable ritual. Horses refused to approach the convent. Even the hen stopped laying eggs regularly. But it was the children who showed the most disturbing signs. Between the ages of 5 and 12, they began to draw things that froze their parents' blood. Hooded figures. Altars stained red. Faces twisted in terror. When asked about these drawings, the children said something that sent chills through the entire village. "The people from the church showed them to us in our dreams." Carmen's revelation. One morning, Maria's 7-year-old daughter Carmen said something over breakfast that made her mother drop the cup she was holding. "Mama," she said innocently, "the man from the church told me I'll soon have new brothers, the ones who'll come from the place where they're buried." Maria felt the blood freeze in her veins. "Who is this man from the church, my dear?" she asked as calmly as she could. "The tall man who talks so nicely," Carmen answered. "He visits me in my dreams. He says the brothers who left are in a better place now, but sometimes they come to see us at night." That was the moment Maria realized she couldn't stay silent any longer. That same Friday, when night fell, she waited by her window again, determined to see if those dreadful rituals were still happening. And what she saw that night confirmed her worst fears. The new faces. The same circle of hooded figures had gathered once more in the convent courtyard. But this time, something was different. The number had dropped, only 8 remained. Yet there were new faces among them. To Maria's horror, she recognized Dolores Pacheco, a 45-year-old widow who had begun attending Father Miguel's special confessions after her son vanished from the sacred circle. And there was also Vicente Cortez, a 38-year-old man who had recently lost his wife and sought spiritual comfort from the priest. But what truly froze Maria's heart was that there were children among them. At least 3 small figures, their height too short to belong to adults. The unearthly ritual. That night ceremony was unlike the others. Instead of constant chanting, there were long, eerie silences, broken only by murmurs that Maria couldn't quite make out. At one point, one of the smaller figures stepped away from the circle and walked toward a hole freshly dug in the ground near the convent's back wall. The child knelt and seemed to speak to something or someone inside the hole. Maria could only watch, trembling, as the child returned to the circle. The ritual continued until the first light of dawn. The father's fear. The next day, Maria noticed that her neighbor, Guadalupe Hernandez, seemed unusually anxious. His 12-year-old son, Pedrito, had been having strange dreams. She approached him quietly at the marketplace. "Guadalupe," she whispered, Have you noticed anything strange with your boy lately? Guadalupe's eyes were hollow. Maria, I don't know what to do, he said. Father Miguel invited Pedrito to join a special group, one that would help cleanse the souls of the village. He says it's a great honor. But Maria pressed. But the boy has changed, Guadalupe continued. He doesn't play with the other children anymore. Last night I found him standing in the courtyard at 3 in the morning, wide awake, talking to someone I couldn't see. A cold shiver crawled up Maria's spine. She gripped his arm and whispered, "Don't let your son go to the convent. Promise me that." Guadalupe didn't answer, but his expression said it all. He had come to the same terrifying conclusion: something was very wrong inside Santa Esperanza. The decision. That night, Maria made a decision that would change everything. When her children were asleep, she slipped out of her house and crept toward the convent. She needed to know, to see with her own eyes what was truly happening. Hidden behind the back wall, she could hear voices clearly now. And what she overheard that night would force her to choose between silence and survival, or action that could cost her life. The revelation in the shadows. The night of October 23, 1654, would forever be carved into Maria Esperanza's memory, the night when reality became more terrifying than any nightmare. Hidden behind the convent wall, her heart hammered so loudly she feared the hooded figures might hear it. She had come only to observe. But what she would overhear would unveil the true nature of Father Miguel's divine callings. The conversation that changed everything. Father Miguel's voice echoed through the night, but this time it was not the voice of ceremony or prayer. It was casual, almost businesslike, which made his words all the more chilling. "Those from the city are asking for more," he said. "The next shipment must be at least 6, preferably under 20 years old. Families in Guadalajara pay more for the younger ones." Maria froze. Her mind could barely process what she was hearing. Shipment? Payment? Then came the trembling voice of Dolores Pacheco. "Father, are you certain this is what God wants from us?" "Sometimes I have doubts." Father Miguel laughed softly, a cold, hollow sound that didn't belong to a man of God. "Dolores, God has granted us a chance to prosper while serving His glory. The youths we've sent away are fulfilling a sacred purpose. Their sacrifice allows us to continue the divine work here." Another voice, male, uncertain, interrupted. "Then why can't we ever hear from them again?" Miguel's tone turned patient, as though explaining to a child. "Because their new life requires them to cut all ties with the past. They have been reborn in service to the Lord. The people they once were no longer exist." Maria's knees trembled. The priest's words had a double meaning, one that chilled her to the core. But then came the sentence that shattered every doubt she had left. "For the next group," said Father Miguel, "we must include new candidates. The boy from the Hernandez family is almost ready. His dreams have been quite revealing. He even confessed family secrets that will help us keep the parents calm once he's gone." Then a pause, and Dolores's voice again. "And the child of Maria Esperanza?" Father Miguel replied without hesitation. "Carmen is perfect. She's the ideal age, and her mother's growing suspicions could become troublesome. If the girl disappears under divine pretense, Maria will either accept God's will or suffer the consequences of defying the church." Maria bit her hand to stop herself from screaming. They were talking about her daughter. About taking Carmen, her little 7-year-old. And suddenly, everything made sense: the disappearances, the lies, the whispers of holy missions. They weren't saving souls. They were selling them. The next shipment. "When will the next shipment leave?" asked Vicente Cortez. "In 3 weeks," answered Father Miguel. "Our partners in Guadalajara are preparing everything. It will be easier now. The families expect their children to be chosen for sacred service." Maria heard footsteps moving in her direction. Panic surged through her chest. She slipped silently behind a nearby bush, just as one of the hooded figures passed within a few feet of her hiding place. From her new vantage point, she could finally see their faces. The hoods were down now, and her suspicions were confirmed. Besides Father Miguel, Dolores Pacheco, and Vicente Cortez, there were 5 more adults she recognized, ordinary townsfolk, people she had seen at Mass every Sunday. All of them had lost relatives in the earlier disappearances. All of them were now helping him. But the worst part was yet to come. Among them stood 3 children, one of them Pedrito Hernandez. Their faces were blank, their eyes open yet unfocused, as if trapped between waking and sleep. Father Miguel leaned toward them and spoke softly, too softly for Maria to hear. The children nodded mechanically, their movements slow and obedient. Then he raised his voice for everyone to hear. "Remember, this is our sacred secret with God. If anyone asks about our meetings, you must say you remember nothing. God protects his mysteries through forgetfulness." The children nodded again. Their gestures were unnaturally stiff, as though rehearsed many times before. The horrifying truth. The ritual went on for another hour, and in that time, Maria heard enough to confirm the unthinkable. The youths who had disappeared weren't serving in faraway convents. They had been sold, traded like livestock to wealthy buyers in distant cities. Father Miguel had built a human trafficking network, using the authority of the church to disguise his crimes. The nightly rituals weren't holy ceremonies at all. They were planning meetings where they decided who would vanish next. And now her daughter was next on the list. When the gathering ended and the courtyard fell silent, Maria stayed hidden until every torch had gone out. Then, trembling and pale, she ran home, clutching her chest, trying not to sob aloud. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat beside her children's bed until dawn, watching them breathe, knowing that in 3 weeks, Father Miguel would come for Carmen with a lie about a divine calling. But Maria Esperanza Villanueva was not the kind of woman to surrender to fear. And what she decided to do next would change the fate of San Isidro del Valle forever. He planned. The days that followed her discovery were the most agonizing of Maria Esperanza's life. She knew she had to act, but one wrong move could doom not only herself and her children, but every other child marked for the next holy mission. So she began to think. Quietly. Patiently. Her first step was to speak with Guadalupe Hernandez, the only person she could trust. She waited until she found him working alone in his small field outside the village, far from curious ears. "Guadalupe," she whispered urgently, "I have to tell you something about your son. But you must promise me, stay calm, and do nothing reckless." He stopped working, his brow already tense. "What happened to Pedrito?" Maria told him everything, the voices, the meetings, the shipments, the names. And as she spoke, Guadalupe's expression changed from confusion to horror, and finally to a cold, shaking fury. "By God! I'll kill him," he muttered through clenched teeth. "I'll storm the convent and slit his throat myself." "No." Maria grabbed his arm, her voice firm. "If you do that, you'll die, and he'll call you a madman. No one will believe us, and the others will keep disappearing. We need proof." Guadalupe fell silent. His rage turned into grim understanding. They would need evidence, and they would need to get it without being caught. The plan was simple and deadly. There were 3 steps. Find physical proof of Father Miguel's crimes. Get that proof to the authorities outside the village, in Guadalajara. Protect their children until help arrived. The first part would be the most dangerous. Maria would have to sneak into the convent itself. The night of the dead. Her chance came soon, on November 2nd, during the Dia de los Muertos celebrations. The whole village was busy honoring their ancestors, and Father Miguel had announced a special vigil at the convent to commune with the souls of the righteous. Maria knew what that meant. Another gathering. Another night when the priest and his followers would be distracted in the courtyard. That would be her moment. When the sun went down and the bells rang for the vigil, Maria slipped out of her home and crept through the alleys toward the convent. The streets were nearly empty, only candlelight flickered in the windows. She reached the stone wall, found the small window of the sacristy, and forced it open just enough to climb inside. Inside, the air was thick with incense and the scent of old books. She lit a small candle and began to move silently through the halls she had known since childhood. But there were parts of the convent she had never entered, locked rooms, sealed stairways, whispers of restricted areas. That night, the locks were gone. The discovery. On the second floor, Maria found a small dormitory, 6 narrow beds, each recently used. On one of them lay something that made her knees weaken. A simple wooden rosary necklace, the very one worn by Ana Lucia Bosques, one of the first to disappear. But the worst discovery was still below. In the basement, in a cold, damp room, she found a long wooden table stained dark with what could only be blood. Beside it, strange tools, and a ledger written in the neat, familiar handwriting of Father Miguel. She opened it with trembling hands. Inside were pages and pages of names, ages, physical descriptions, and prices. Each line read like a sale record. Catalina Herrera, 19 years old. Brown hair, slender, gifted singing voice. Obedient and devout. Price, 200 gold pesos. Delivered, March 15, 1654. Destination, House of Don Rodrigo Mendoza, Guadalajara. Ana Lucia Bosques, 20 years old. Blonde, skilled in embroidery, prosperous family. Price, 250 gold pesos. Delivered, April 3, 1654. Destination, Hacienda de los Espiritus, Zacatecas. The list went on, page after page. Each entry cold, methodical, like the inventory of livestock. But what made Maria's stomach twist in horror was what she found at the end, a section titled Next Deliveries, November 1654. There, in neat ink, was written: Carmen Villanueva, 7 years old. Bright, obedient child. Family without political connections. Ideal for early training. Estimated price, 300 gold pesos. And beside it, in the margin, a note. Buyers from the capital pay extra for children under 10. Maria's hands shook violently. The room spun. They had placed a price on her daughter's life. The escape. She clutched the ledger to her chest and slipped back through the convent, every creak of the floorboard sounding like thunder in her ears. When she finally reached the window, she exhaled shakily and escaped into the cold night, unseen. She had what she needed. But the clock was ticking. According to the book, the next shipment would leave in 1 week. The next morning, Maria met with Guadalupe again and handed him the ledger, carefully wrapped in cloth. You must go to Guadalajara, she told him. Tell the authorities everything. Bring them this. If Father Miguel learns what we're doing, we're all dead. Guadalupe nodded. His face was pale, but his voice was steady. I'll leave at dawn. You protect the children. And so he left, carrying with him the proof of evil that would expose the priest's crimes. The confrontation. 3 days passed. The air in San Isidro del Valle grew heavier by the hour, as if the village itself sensed something monstrous was about to end. Father Miguel looked restless. His sermons became shorter, sharper, and his smile no longer reached his eyes. He had increased the number of his special confessions, especially with the children. Maria watched him closely, pretending nothing was wrong, but inside, her fear grew unbearable. Then, on the 4th night, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. Her daughter, Carmen, had begun to change. She spoke of dreams where the tall man from the church whispered to her. She had even started to wake in the middle of the night and stare silently toward the convent. That was when Maria knew she couldn't wait any longer. She had to act, even if it meant revealing what she knew and facing Father Miguel herself. The night visit. It was late, well past midnight, when Maria left her house. Her footsteps echoed against the cobblestones as she approached the convent. Inside, a few candles flickered through the windows of the priest's study. She didn't knock. She pushed the door open. Father Miguel looked up from his desk, startled, his expression shifting quickly from surprise to something darker, colder. "Maria Esperanza," he said, in that smooth voice of his, "what an unexpected visit. To what do I owe this honor?" She didn't waste a second. "I know what happened to the children," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "I know what you did to Catalina, to Ana Lucia, to all of them." For a moment, he didn't move. Then, slowly, he stood up and closed the door behind her with a soft click. His voice lost all its pastoral tone. "And what is it you think happened, dear Maria?" "You sold them," she said. "Like animals. And now you want to take my daughter." He stared at her for a long moment, then began to laugh. It wasn't a human laugh. It was cold, hollow, echoing through the stone room like the hiss of a serpent. "Maria, Maria," he said, shaking his head, "you've always been too curious for your own good. Do you know what happens to curious people in little towns like this?" "I don't care what happens to me," she shot back. "You're not touching my child." "I'm afraid," he said, stepping toward her, "that decision is no longer yours. You see, Carmen has already been promised to certain benefactors. She's very valuable because of her age." Maria's voice hardened. "The authorities already know the truth," she lied, praying he'd believe her. "Guadalupe took your ledger to Guadalajara. They're coming for you." The priest froze. Then his smile returned, this time twisted with cruel amusement. "Ah, you mean poor Guadalupe," he whispered. "Such a tragedy. An accident on the road 2 days ago. Got lost in the mountains during a storm. They may never even find the body." Maria felt the world collapse around her. Guadalupe dead? Her only hope gone? Miguel stepped closer, his eyes glowing with malice. "Now," he said softly, "we must decide what to do with you. I cannot allow one frightened mother to destroy such a prosperous arrangement." He reached for her arm, and then they both froze. From outside the convent came the sound of voices. Dozens of them. Heavy footsteps. The noise echoed through the hall, torches, shouts, boots on stone. Father Miguel turned toward the sound, genuine fear flashing across his face for the first time. "What is that?" he muttered. Maria took a step back, hope flickering in her chest. The footsteps grew louder, climbing the stone stairs toward the study. Then, 3 heavy knocks rattled the door. "Father Miguel Santa Maria," a voice commanded, deep and authoritative. "Open the door." We have urgent matters to discuss. The priest's eyes darted to Maria, filled with fury and panic. Not a word, he hissed. If you speak, your daughter will pay the price. He turned toward the door, forcing calm into his voice. Who dares disturb the Lord's house at this hour? From behind the door came the reply. Men who have questions about the disappearance of certain youths and about some very specific records that have fallen into the wrong hands. Father Miguel's face went pale. His hand trembled as it reached for the latch. There must be some misunderstanding, he stammered. The only misunderstanding, the voice replied, was believing that no one would ever find out. The truth at the door. When the priest finally opened the door, Maria gasped. Standing there was Don Fernando Bosques, father of Ana Lucia, beside Sebastian Herrera, father of Catalina, and 3 merchants who had also lost family members. But they were not alone. Behind them stood a man in the dark robes of the Holy Inquisition, and beside him, Guadalupe Hernandez, alive, bandaged, one arm in a sling, clutching the very ledger Maria had found. Father Miguel staggered back, color draining from his face. The Inquisitor's voice cut through the room like a blade. Father Miguel Santa Maria, you are under arrest for heresy, human trafficking, and murder by order of the Holy Office of the Inquisition and the Viceroy of New Spain. The fall of a saint. The transformation was instant. The mask of holiness shattered, revealing the monster beneath. There must be some mistake, he screamed. I am a humble servant of God. What absurd accusations are these? Don Fernando stepped forward, eyes blazing. Accusations? My daughter is alive, father, alive. Found in Guadalajara, working as a slave in a hacienda. And she has told us everything, every word, every lie, every name. Sebastian added, his voice trembling with fury. My Catalina too. Her story matches perfectly with your records. You sold them, you damned them. The Inquisitor continued coldly. We have 8 written testimonies from the youths you trafficked. We have your financial records, the names of buyers, and witnesses to your rituals here in this convent. Guadalupe stepped forward, lifting the ledger. And we have this, every sale in your own handwriting. Every child listed like cattle in a market. Father Miguel looked wildly toward the window, as if calculating escape, but the men had already surrounded him. Where is my son? Guadalupe demanded, voice breaking. Where is Pedrito? His name isn't in your records. He must be here. The judgment. Guadalupe's question echoed in the silent room. Where is my son? He demanded. Where is Pedrito? Father Miguel didn't answer. His lips trembled, his eyes darting between the Inquisitor and the furious parents surrounding him. Maria finally found her voice. I thought you were dead, she said to Guadalupe, tears welling. He gave her a tired, broken smile. I almost was. 3 men ambushed me on the road, probably his men. I escaped, but it took me 4 days to reach Guadalajara. When I showed the ledger to the authorities, they found much more than we imagined. The Inquisitor stepped forward, his expression hard. Your partners in Guadalajara have already been arrested, he said coldly. Don Rodrigo Mendoza and his associates have confessed everything. We have names, buyers, locations, even the money trails. And we have testimony that many of the children never survived their service. For the first time, the mask of control broke. Father Miguel's calm melted into sheer panic and then rage. You fools, he shouted, his face twisting. You don't understand. Those young souls were wasting their lives in this miserable village. I gave them purpose, a chance to serve something greater than themselves. Serve, roared Sebastian Herrera. You call selling children service? It was for the good of the church. Miguel screamed, spittle flying. The money built convents, spread the faith. Everything I did was in God's name. The Inquisitor's voice sliced through the chaos. No, Father. You built nothing but your own greed. We found accounts in your name in 3 cities, enough gold to pay 100 men for 10 years. You used the church to feed your sins. Don Fernando stepped closer, his voice shaking. And the rituals? The nights of chanting? The blood? The Inquisitor answered for him. Not rituals, preparation. Psychological control. They used drugs, herbs, and fear to break the minds of the children before they were sold. Maria gasped softly. What about the others? She asked. The ones still here, the children who took part in the rituals. Guadalupe answered, his voice quieter now. We found them. Locked in the cells upstairs. Dazed, like sleepwalkers. The doctor says they were given herbs to keep them obedient and confused. They'll recover, with time. Father Miguel was bound in irons. As they dragged him toward the door, he turned his head and fixed Maria with a glare filled with venom. This isn't over, he hissed. The network is larger than you think. There are others, in other towns, other churches. And they will know it was you who destroyed everything. Maria said nothing. But in her silence burned a strength that made even the Inquisitor glance at her with respect. Do not fear his threats, the Inquisitor told her gently. His entire network is being dismantled. You, Senora, have saved not only your daughter, but dozens of other children who would have shared her fate. The trial. Father Miguel Santa Maria was taken to Mexico City, where the Holy Inquisition held his trial. Over weeks of testimony, his entire operation unraveled. It turned out he had committed similar crimes in 3 previous parishes, trafficking over 60 people, some as young as 5. He was found guilty of heresy, murder, corruption, and human trafficking. The sentence was death by fire, carried out publicly on August 15, 1661, in the Plaza Mayor of Mexico City, before a crowd that included families of his victims. His co-conspirators in San Isidro del Valle, Dolores Pacheco and Vicente Cortez, were sentenced to 20 years of forced labor in the silver mines. Others who had played smaller roles were exiled permanently. The cleansing of the convent. The convent of Santa Esperanza was closed by order of the Archbishop of Guadalajara. It remained abandoned for 5 years before being demolished in 1660. In its place, a public square was built, dedicated to the memory of the victims. During the demolition, workers found the final proof of what had happened there. The remains of 6 people buried beneath the basement, a grim confirmation of everything Maria had seen. The survivors. The rescued children were treated by a physician sent from Mexico City, one of the few who understood the strange mixture of herbs and hypnosis used to control them. Pedrito Hernandez was among the worst cases. For weeks he woke up at night and walked toward the ruins of the convent, as if still under its spell. But slowly, through care and traditional medicines, he recovered. Carmen Villanueva, Maria's daughter, had been under Miguel's influence for less time, so her recovery was faster, though for years she would wake screaming, seeing hooded figures in her dreams. The legacy of Maria Esperanza. Maria Esperanza Villanueva became a local hero, not just in San Isidro del Valle, but across the region. Her courage inspired others to question and expose corruption within the church. She received formal recognition from both civil and ecclesiastical authorities, and her testimony was later used to create new regulations for monitoring convents and isolated parishes. Guadalupe Hernandez, too, was honored for his bravery. Despite his injuries, he had carried the evidence through mountains and storms, saving countless lives. But San Isidro del Valle was never the same. Many families left, unable to bear the memories. Others arrived, yet the town's innocence was gone forever. Each year, on October 23rd, the townsfolk held a ceremony in the plaza, reading aloud the names of the victims, renewing their vow to protect the innocent. Epilogue: The woman who faced the darkness. Maria lived to be 69 years old, passing peacefully in 1689, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. Her last words were simple: "Never let fear stop you from protecting the innocent. God gives us courage when we need it most." On her tombstone, in the cemetery of San Isidro del Valle, the inscription reads, "Here lies Maria Esperanza Villanueva, the woman who faced the darkness and brought light to the world." The story of Father Miguel Santamaria reminds us that the true monsters are not supernatural beings lurking in the shadows, but humans who use faith, trust, and authority to exploit the innocent. And the tale of Maria Esperanza reminds us that even one voice, guided by love and courage, can tear down centuries of silence. So now I'll ask you, do you believe everything was truly revealed? Or do you think other secrets may still lie buried within the church's forgotten archives? If you were brave enough to listen until the end, you're one of us now. A seeker of truth. A hunter of the hidden.